Nestled in the heart of a dense forest, far from the bustling cities, was the quaint village of Ardenwood. To the casual observer, it seemed idyllic, a place untouched by the modern world. Cobblestone streets wound between timber-framed houses, their thatched roofs quaintly charming. Villagers greeted each other warmly, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming wildflowers. Yet, beneath this serene facade, a chilling secret festered. Every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unnatural silence enveloped Ardenwood. No owls hooted, no crickets chirped, and the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves during the day ceased to blow. The villagers, as if by unspoken agreement, retreated into their homes, bolting doors and fastening shutters. Not a soul dared venture outside after dark, for fear of the unseen silence. One late autumn day, a stranger arrived in Ardenwood. His name was Michael Thorne, a travel writer seeking inspiration for his next book. He was captivated by the village's charm and the locals' warmth during the daylight hours. As he sat at the village inn, sipping on a mug of ale, he struck up a conversation with the innkeeper, a burly man named Thomas. "Ardenwood is a remarkable place," Michael said, "but I've noticed that everyone seems to disappear come nightfall. What's the story behind that?" Thomas's jovial demeanor darkened, and he glanced around nervously before replying, "It's best not to speak of such things, especially after dark. But if you're staying, you'll do well to heed our warnings. Lock your doors and stay inside." Intrigued and somewhat skeptical, Michael pressed further, but Thomas refused to elaborate. That night, as Michael settled into his room, he found his curiosity gnawing at him. Determined to uncover the truth, he resolved to stay awake and observe the village after sunset. As darkness fell, Michael sat by his window, peering out into the silent streets. The village seemed to hold its breath, and an oppressive stillness filled the air. Hours passed, and just as he was about to give up, he noticed a faint movement near the edge of the forest. A shadowy figure slipped out from between the trees and glided through the village. Michael's heart raced. He grabbed his notebook and quietly crept downstairs, careful not to alert anyone. Slipping out the back door, he followed the figure at a distance. The figure moved with an eerie fluidity, almost as if it were floating. It stopped in front of a house at the far end of the village and seemed to merge with the wall, disappearing from sight. Curiosity piqued, Michael approached the house cautiously. He pressed his ear against the door and heard faint, rhythmic chanting. Before he could react, a cold hand clamped down on his shoulder, and he spun around to face Thomas. "You shouldn't be here," Thomas whispered urgently. "Get inside, now." Reluctantly, Michael allowed himself to be dragged back to the inn. Once inside, Thomas locked the door and faced him, his expression grim. "You've seen too much. Tomorrow, you must leave Ardenwood." Michael refused to be dissuaded. "I need to know what's happening here, Thomas. I can't just walk away from this." Sighing, Thomas relented. "Very well. But understand this, knowing the truth might be more dangerous than you realize." He settled into a chair and began his tale. Many years ago, Ardenwood was cursed by a malevolent spirit known as the Unseen. It preys on those who wander outside after dark, consuming their souls and leaving nothing but empty shells behind. The villagers you see today are the descendants of the original inhabitants who made a pact with the spirit. In exchange for their lives, they agreed to a nightly curfew, ensuring no one would be out to attract the unseen's attention. Michael listened intently, his pen scribbling furiously. But why doesn't anyone leave? Surely, they could escape the curse by moving away. Thomas shook his head. The curse binds us to this land. Anyone who tries to leave meets a terrible fate. The forest itself seems to conspire to bring them back, or worse, they simply vanish. The next day, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Despite Thomas's warnings, he decided to explore the forest. Equipped with a map, a flashlight, and a resolve to uncover the truth, he ventured into the dense woods. The forest was eerily silent, and the deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the very trees were watching him, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. After hours of trudging through the undergrowth, he stumbled upon a clearing. At its center stood a crumbling stone altar, covered in ancient runes. Michael approached the altar cautiously. As he examined the runes, a sense of unease washed over him. They seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and he could almost hear whispers in a language he didn't understand. He quickly sketched the symbols in his notebook, hoping to research their meaning later. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind swept through the clearing, and Michael felt an overwhelming urge to leave. He turned to find his way back, but the forest had changed. The path he had taken was gone, replaced by dense thickets and twisted roots. Panic set in as he realized he was lost. As night began to fall, Michael's anxiety grew. He fumbled for his flashlight, but the batteries were dead. In the growing darkness, he heard the faint sound of chanting again, the same rhythm he had heard the night before. Desperate, he followed the sound, hoping it would lead him back to the village. The chanting grew louder, and soon he saw a faint light through the trees. He stumbled into another clearing, where a group of hooded figures stood in a circle, chanting around a flickering fire. At the center of the circle was the shadowy figure he had seen the previous night. The chanting ceased as the figures turned to face him. Michael's heart pounded as he realized he was surrounded. The shadowy figure stepped forward, its form shifting and flickering in the firelight. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its voice like the rustling of dry leaves. Gathering his courage, Michael demanded, "Who are you? What is this place?" The figure seemed to smile, though it had no visible mouth. "I am the unseen, bound to this land by the folly of your ancestors. And now, you too are bound." Michael's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "What do you want from me?" The unseen extended a shadowy hand. "Your presence here has awakened old powers. You must leave Ardenwood and spread the tale, or face the same fate as those who defy me." The hooded figures chanted again, and Michael felt himself being pulled towards the shadowy hand. With a surge of defiance, he broke free and fled into the forest, the chanting echoing in his ears. He ran blindly, branches whipping at his face, until he stumbled and fell. When he looked up, he found himself at the edge of the village. Exhausted and terrified, he staggered back to the inn. Thomas was waiting for him, his face a mask of concern. "I warned you," he said quietly. "Now you must leave before it's too late." Michael nodded, too shaken to argue. He packed his belongings and, with Thomas's help, made his way to the edge of the forest. As they reached the boundary, Thomas pressed a small, intricately carved talisman into Michael's hand. "Take this," he said. "It will protect you on your journey. Do not look back." With a final nod, Michael turned and walked away from Ardenwood, the weight of the village's curse heavy on his shoulders. He didn't look back, but he could feel the eyes of the forest watching him, the whispers of the unseen following him. Months passed, and Michael's experience in Ardenwood became the basis for his new book, The Unseen Silence. The book quickly became a bestseller, captivating readers with its chilling tale of a cursed village and its dark secret. Despite the success, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the unseen's influence still lingered. One evening, as he prepared for a book signing event, he received a package. Inside was an old, weathered book filled with symbols similar to those he had seen on the altar. Attached was a note, "The truth lies within. Do not ignore it." Haunted by the memories and unable to resist, Michael began to study the book. As he delved deeper, he discovered that the symbols were part of an ancient ritual to bind and unbind spirits. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt: he had the knowledge to break the curse of Ardenwood. Driven by a newfound sense of purpose, Michael returned to Ardenwood. The villagers were shocked to see him, but Thomas welcomed him back with a mix of hope and fear. "You've come to end this, haven't you?" Thomas asked. Michael nodded. "I believe I have the means to break the curse. But I'll need your help." That night, as darkness fell, Michael and Thomas led a small group of villagers into the forest. They made their way to the clearing with the stone altar, where Michael began to recite the incantations from the ancient book. The air grew thick with tension as the chanting of the unseen echoed around them. As Michael spoke the final words, a piercing scream shattered the silence, and the shadowy figure of the unseen appeared, writhing in agony. The hooded figures dissolved into wisps of smoke, and the oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the sounds of the forest coming back to life. The unseen let out one final, desperate wail before vanishing into the night, leaving behind an eerie calm. The curse was broken. In the days that followed, the villagers of Ardenwood emerged from their homes, bewildered but relieved. The oppressive silence that had plagued them for generations was gone, and the village slowly began to heal. Michael stayed for a while, helping the villagers adjust to their newfound freedom. He documented their stories, ensuring that the tale of Ardenwood would be remembered, not as a place of fear, but as a testament to the resilience of its people. As he prepared to leave once more, Thomas handed him the talisman. "Keep it," he said. "A reminder of the power of courage and knowledge." Michael smiled and accepted the gift. As he walked away from Ardenwood for the last time, he felt a sense of peace. The unseen was gone, and the village was free. And in his heart, he knew that the true horror lay not in the darkness, but in the silence that hid the truth. Years later, Michael's book continued to inspire and terrify readers around the world. The story of Ardenwood became a legend, a chilling reminder of the power of unseen forces and the courage it takes to face them. Michael himself went on to write many more books, but none ever held the same personal significance as the unseen silence. He kept the talisman on his desk, a constant reminder of the village that had changed his life forever. And though he never returned to Ardenwood, he knew that its story would live on, a haunting echo in the annals of history, a testament to the enduring power of human courage and the eternal struggle against the darkness. In the remote highlands of Eastern Europe, nestled among thick, whispering forests, lay a village shrouded in mystery. This village, called Lurn, was known to outsiders only through whispered tales, for those who ventured too close often did not return. The villagers, pale and quiet, went about their lives under the heavy shadows of tall, ancient trees that seemed to close in around the settlement, keeping the world at bay. Marcus, an ambitious young journalist from the city, had always been fascinated by the unexplained. When he stumbled upon an old map depicting Lurn and heard hushed mentions of its eerie history, he knew he had to investigate. His editor was reluctant but ultimately granted him permission to pursue the story. As Marcus drove through the winding, fog-clad roads leading to Lurn, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. The trees seemed to lean towards him, their branches clawing at the air like skeletal fingers. By the time he reached the village outskirts, the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows. Marcus parked his car near the village square and stepped out, taking in his surroundings. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. He approached a small inn, its sign creaking in the gentle breeze. As he entered, the innkeeper, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a solemn expression, greeted him. "Welcome to Lurn," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't get many visitors." Marcus introduced himself and explained his purpose. The innkeeper's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded and led him to a modest room. "Dinner is at 7. Please, be careful around the village after dark." Her words sent a shiver down Marcus's spine, but he dismissed it as superstition. After settling in, he decided to explore the village before dinner. As he walked through the narrow, cobbled streets, he noticed the villagers' wary glances and hurried movements. It was as if they were afraid of something or someone. During dinner, Marcus attempted to engage the innkeeper and other guests in conversation, but they remained tight-lipped about the village's history. Frustrated, he retired to his room and began reviewing his notes. As he was about to turn in for the night, he heard faint whispers outside his window. Curiosity piqued, he cautiously opened the window and peered out. In the dim moonlight, he saw a group of villagers gathered near an old, decrepit church at the edge of the village. Their murmurs were barely audible, but the urgency in their tone was clear. Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus grabbed his coat and quietly slipped out of the inn. He followed the villagers at a safe distance, his heart pounding in his chest. The group entered the church, and Marcus waited for a few moments before sneaking in after them. Inside, the church was cold and damp, its once grand interior now crumbling and covered in cobwebs. The villagers stood in a circle, chanting softly in a language Marcus couldn't understand. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a chilling presence filled the room. The candles flickered and then went out, plunging the church into darkness. Marcus felt a cold hand on his shoulder and spun around, but there was no one there. Panic rising, he backed away, stumbling over a broken pew. The next morning, Marcus awoke with a sense of foreboding. Determined to get answers, he visited the village library, a small, dusty room filled with ancient tomes. The librarian, a frail old man named Gregor, seemed more willing to talk than the others. "Why are the villagers so afraid?" Marcus asked. Gregor sighed, looking around nervously before speaking. "There is a legend that haunts Lerne. Centuries ago, a powerful sorcerer named Dragan lived here. He delved into dark magic, seeking to commune with spirits and gain eternal life. The villagers, terrified of his power, captured and executed him. But with his dying breath, Dragan cursed the village, vowing to return and claim the souls of those who wronged him." Marcus listened intently, his skepticism waning. "Has anyone ever seen his spirit?" Gregor nodded. "Every generation, someone claims to have seen Dragan's ghost. Those who do often disappear shortly after. The villagers believe his spirit still wanders the forest, waiting for the right moment to exact his revenge." Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus decided to explore the forest. Despite Gregor's warnings, he ventured into the dense woods, armed with a flashlight and his notebook. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves underfoot. As he ventured deeper, the trees seemed to close in around him, their twisted branches blocking out the sunlight. Marcus felt a growing sense of unease, but he pressed on, convinced that the answers he sought lay within the heart of the forest. Hours passed, and just as Marcus was about to turn back, he stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a tall, ancient tree with a hollow trunk. The air around it was unnaturally cold, and a faint whisper seemed to emanate from within the tree. Gathering his courage, Marcus approached the tree and peered into the hollow. Inside, he found a collection of old, tattered scrolls and a strange, glowing amulet. As he reached for the amulet, a shadowy figure materialized before him, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. The figure spoke in a voice that echoed through the clearing, "I am Dragan. You seek the truth, but are you prepared to pay the price?" Marcus's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "I need to know what happened to you and why the village is cursed." Dragan's eyes glowed brighter. "The villagers betrayed me, condemned me for seeking knowledge beyond their understanding. With my last breath, I cursed them to suffer as I have suffered. And now, you have found the key to breaking the curse." Marcus looked at the amulet in his hand. "How can the curse be broken?" Dragan's form wavered, and his voice softened. "To break the curse, you must offer a willing sacrifice, a soul to take my place in the realm of the damned. Only then will the village be free." Marcus recoiled at the thought. There must be another way. Dragan's eyes flared with anger. "There is no other way. Choose wisely, or the village will be doomed for eternity." Marcus returned to the village, the weight of Dragan's words heavy on his mind. He couldn't bring himself to condemn an innocent soul, but he also couldn't ignore the villagers' suffering. Torn, he spent the night tossing and turning, unable to find a solution. The next day, he confided in Gregor, who listened with a grave expression. "There is a ritual," Gregor said slowly, "one that might offer a chance at redemption. It requires the cooperation of the villagers and a pure heart to lead the ceremony. Desperate, Marcus gathered the villagers and explained the situation. Though fearful, they agreed to help, hoping to end their centuries-long torment. That night, they assembled in the church, where Marcus led the ritual under Gregor's guidance. As they chanted, the air grew thick with tension. Dragon's spirit appeared, his form flickering like a dying flame. "You dare defy me?" he roared. Marcus stepped forward, holding the amulet. "We seek to break the curse without sacrificing an innocent soul. If you have any humanity left, you will let them go." For a moment, Dragon's fiery eyes softened, and a pained expression crossed his face. "Very well," he said slowly. "If you truly wish to break the curse, you must offer your own soul in place of another." Marcus hesitated, the enormity of the decision weighing on him. But as he looked at the villagers' hopeful faces, he knew what he had to do. "I accept," he said, his voice steady. "I offer my soul to break the curse." The villagers gasped, and Gregor stepped forward. "Are you sure, Marcus? This is a heavy burden." Marcus nodded. "It's the only way." Dragon's form wavered, and he extended a hand. "Then it is done." As Marcus grasped Dragon's hand, a blinding light filled the church. The villagers watched in awe as the spirit of Dragon dissolved into the light, and Marcus collapsed to the floor. When Marcus awoke, he was lying in the village square, surrounded by concerned villagers. The oppressive darkness that had hung over Lerne was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. The curse had been lifted. Gregor helped Marcus to his feet. "You did it," he said, tears of gratitude in his eyes. "You saved us." Marcus smiled weakly. "It was worth it." As the villagers celebrated their newfound freedom, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment. He had uncovered the truth and freed the village from its dark past. Though he had sacrificed his soul, he knew it was the right choice. In the weeks that followed, Marcus's story spread, bringing him both acclaim and respect. He continued to write, using his experiences in Lerne to shed light on other mysteries. And though he knew his time was limited, he found solace in knowing that he had made a difference. Years passed, and the village of Lerne flourished, its dark history becoming a distant memory. The villagers never forgot the sacrifice Marcus had made for them, and they honored his memory with a statue in the village square. One night, as the villagers gathered for their annual celebration, a faint whisper echoed through the village, carried on the wind. It was the voice of Marcus, a gentle reminder of the man who had saved them. And in the heart of the ancient forest, the hollow tree stood silent, its secrets buried